In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges I faced incorporating the rules of Knave into the Weird and Wild, my solutions for those challenges, and some of the other things I've had to tweak to start using this setting. So let's get into this. Welcome to Solitary RPG. In this little rule book, there's only about 16 pages, and believe it or not, most of it is character creation. The actual rules playing the game really boil down to pages 9, 10, 11, and 12, and that's pretty much it. After that, you get into magic and spells, and then you got some character sheet information. The front half of this really has to do with character creation, which I'll admit I do like the character creation for Knave. It's really straightforward, and you just roll on some dice, you get some stuff, and you just move on. Get a little bit of backstory and things like that. So, good little rule system. But what I had to figure out is how I was going to take the encounters from Into the Weird and Wild and use the rules for Knave. And the first thing I did, obviously, was read the rules of Knave. And they do have a little conversion chart here under monsters. They use ascending and descending armor class if you're into old school D&D or OSR games. Talk about attack bonuses, damage, morale, saves, and they give a little example. Basically, what they're saying with this conversion is take the hit dice that are listed for the characters, use that for their bonuses, for all their stat bonuses. So if you got, in the example here, if you got a typical monster that has 4 hit dice, then they'd get +4 on their bonuses for their stats, and they would have a defense of 14. So basically adding 10 to the hit dice to create their defense bonus. So I started looking at that, and then I went to looking at my creatures or my encounters in Knave, and here's the Devil Stag, which is an encounter I actually want to find this encounter. So in Into the Weird and Wild, we have an armor class, we have hit dice, so this creature has a hit dice of 7, and it already has hit points listed out at 35. So if we were to use the rules that are written in Knave, this encounter would basically be a level 7 encounter having a +7 to their rolls, and would have a 17 armor class, which would make this a really hard creature to hit, which kind of fits into the world and would make sense. But I do think it would be a little bit hard for some of these some of these encounters, and then some of the other encounters would be super easy, especially when you start getting into something that has a hit dice of like 1. This creature has a hit dice of 10, which would make it next to impossible to hit. And I don't think that should be their defense should be that high. I think that's a little bit high on some of these. So I started looking at all the creatures have an armor class. Either it's hide, chainmail, plate mail, scale, something of that nature. And when you go back into Knave and you look under armor, they have their version of leather armor, chainmail, half plate, and full plate. And they have defense values listed. So full plate would be a defense of 16, half plate 15, chain 14, Brigandine 13. I doubt I'm saying that right. And Gambison 12. So I felt it'd probably be better to use these to make this more of a balanced way of looking at the defense values for the creatures. Not necessarily based on hit dice, but would give me more options. And I kind of broke everything down in my journal, talking about the hit dice. Into the Weird and Wild, these are all the different hit values that I have. Some encounters are going to have no armor at all. So those are going to be auto hits. Looking at the encounters that have no armor, they're very small encounters, like the spiders and things like that. Then we have hide, we have leather, studded leather, chain or chainmail. As armor is one of the categories, scale, and plate. And I felt these were a pretty easy way to just transfer right over to the armor class that's listed in the equipments to create their defense, and would create a little bit more balance, justifying, because this is going to be a hunting adventure. This is not going to be anything more than just my character going out in the woods into the weird and wild and going hunting to see what happens. So I felt this would be a little bit better. Like this particular feral knight does have plate, and a full plate armor would give him a defense of 16. So this is how I'm going to translate the information from here to work with Knave, is just using the armor class listed and making that their defense value. And I think it's going to work out a little bit better than how the rules have it listed in Knave of using the hit dice, because I feel some of the creatures are going to be impossible to hit. Their defense is going to be so high, I'm never going to be able to do anything with them, because some of these encounters have very high defense values, which would make them very high encounters. I get it, but I still want to be able to have some kind of a chance to hit them. So we're got that going. So that's the first thing. And then as far as any bonuses that I'm going to give them, I'm going to start by using the HD as their bonus. Their hit dice as their bonus. I do feel that's gonna be probably more realistic, because some of these encounters would, these are mythical creatures. They should have a better chance of hitting back, or if some of these creatures we actually talk to, we could use that for rolls of them influencing me or whatever would come up. So I'm going to use their hit dice as their bonus. So they rolled a hit, this encounter would get a +3 on the roll, simply because that's their hit dice, and things of that nature. So that's kind of where I'm going with the combat side of this encounter, and I think it's going to work out pretty good. I'm not going to use ascending and descending armor class. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's an unnecessary step. If the armor class is hide gives them a 14. That's what I need to roll over that to hit this encounter. That just makes it simple, and that's all I'm really after. So that's where I'm working on this portion of everything. I'm also going to be incorporating a solo pamphlet that I downloaded from Parts Per Million. I'm a fan of Parts Per Million, and I'm becoming a bigger fan every time I find something new from them. I recently just ordered the solo pamphlet for Old School Essentials, because I just want to see the author's name is Peter Ruben Burgess, and I just want to see what he does. He has a great little YouTube channel if you're interested in hearing some of his philosophies, his thoughts. Puts out really short videos, just like his rules are very short and concise and to the point. Not a lot of fluff and other things going on in his videos. But I kind of wanted to go with this because Knave is a D20 system. So he created a oracle using a D20. I want that will keep the dice theme the same, which I like. He also incorporated something called Shake Up, which is basically if you roll a 10 or 11, there's going to be some sort of a plot twist or something's going to happen. So this is just going to shake up the adventure. I think this is going to be a cool feature. He also talks about likely and unlikely. So what he's talking about here is incorporating advantage or disadvantage. Rolling. So if something's likely, I'll get to roll 2d20, take the best result. If something's unlikely, I'll roll 2d20 and take the lowest result, which is going to be a great way to incorporate some of the rules from Into the Weird and Wild, with getting lost and things of that nature. uh, in this, giving me an opportunity to go likely, unlikely, rolling on an oracle, and going forward. And then here, just a simple little word suggestions, things to stimulate your thinking. Like what's in the box? You roll a d20, a d8, and a d6. Get a bunch, take the words, figure out what you got. It's a good little tool. You don't need long charts full of words, and I do get wrapped up into that trap every once in a while where I have to have lots of charts and graphs and things. Don't need it. Keep it simple. Just move the story forward. Just because something says release, you can use other words like a thesaurus, getting different words for release to stimulate your mind. It's just a quick spark to get you going in the right direction. And then it's a 2-page pamphlet. Talks a little bit about your answers. The NPC reactions. This is pretty much the same one that's in Knave. Actually, it is the same one. But it just talks a little bit about your plots, your journal, and just good information. A little 2-page pamphlet for Knave, the lonely Knave, playing by yourself. I liked it, so I picked it up. I'm going to incorporate it into my game when I start playing. Right now, I've just been doing a lot of testing and things of that, just making sure things are going to work. So I'm working on it. But this is something new I'm going to incorporate. So far, this is where I'm at with the combat aspect of incorporating these rules into the Weird and Wild and trying to make sense of how it's all going to work. And I think I've got a good foundation. Here's the cool thing about solo adventuring. This is where I'm starting. Doesn't mean this is where I'm going to end. I could end up, encountering my first creature during gameplay, and I'm using the armor and I find out it's just too easy, or it's just not flavorful enough for me. Then I can adjust as I play. But I want to have a starting point. So this is where my starting point is. The other thing I needed to work out for this game is the wilderness adventure. This is your dungeons, and I don't remember what page it was on. Wilderness dungeon on page 188 is where it starts. Talks about wilderness dungeons. So this is not, it's a hex crawl, but it's not a hex crawl. It's kind of interesting. I like kind of the concept, what they're talking about with generating the wilderness dungeon. You're following a path, but you can go off the path. So in a dungeon, you can't go through walls and just walk wherever. Into the Weird and Wild lets you do that. And then if you do walk off the path, there's rules in here about getting lost. I've shown those in my previous video. But you want to approach your generation of your wilderness as if it's a dungeon. So everything's going to be connected by a path. So all your key elements are going to be connected by either a known path or a hidden path. It's just part of the system. So I've made a custom dice tray specifically for this game system. And I'm going to put it up in the upper left corner, hopefully not catching too much of a glare off of my lights. And the way this system works, let me get back to that page, is the first thing you're going to do is you're going to roll for your entrance into your dungeon. So your X goes here. And one of the things I did to kind of keep track of everything I have going on is I made a poor man's lamination version of these pages or this worksheet, and just put a printout in a page protector, and then I can just use a dry erase marker to write on it. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to roll for your entrance into the dungeon. So this is just a simple D8 roll. All right, so I rolled a 6. Through the ribs of a Linnorm's corpse. I'll have to figure out what that is. But what I can do is I don't need to write down exactly what the entrance is to my dungeon. I can just take my sheet and just put a 6 right here representing my entrance. And then after that, what you're going to do is you're going to roll a d8 again. And this is going to represent how many d6s you drop in your dice tray to represent all the different features within this 6-mile radius. Because this is a 6-mile hex, larger hex, and each one of these is a mile, to just give you some scale. So roll my d8. I have a 2. So this means I'm going to roll 2d6s for terrain features in this space. Now, I found using either a page like this or a dice tray, if you roll, dice have a tendency to kind of group together. So what I do is I just roll the dice in my hand and just kind of drop them. And even here, it's not the greatest drop. If you don't like it, just shuffle it around. This is your game, so you can kind of do whatever you want to kind of create that flavor or whatever you're after. Especially if they just all kind of group over to the side or something like that. Make your game your own. And if you want to put them in specific places, nothing's stopping you. But the value is important. And the reason for that is the value on the D6 represents kind of the size of what you have in that area. So a 1 could just be a tree stump or a large puddle, to a 6, which is a ruined abbey or a acre of trees, a big grouping of trees. So this is what you'll use to kind of generate how much space you're taking up in that area. Granted, these are mile hexes, so the acre trees, sure, that's going to be a big spot, but a hamlet's not going to be a mile-long spot. I guess it could, but that would be a little hard-pressed. So what you're going to do is you're now going to take your sheet and you're going to kind of look at where everything is. So this is going to be a 5, and then I'm going to go up here. I'm doing my best to kind of figure, and that's going to be a 4 there. So those are my 2 features. So a 5 and a 4. So I have the 4 can be a hamlet or a large riverbed. A 5 can be a hillside or a cow pasture. These are just suggestions. They're not hard facts. Just because it says a hillside, you could make it a rocky cliff. You could make it. You could just make it a regular hillside. Cow pasture could also be a farm. It could be a rows of trees. It could be whatever you want. It's just to represent size. So this 5 is going to be a pretty big something I'm going to come in contact with, and the 4 being a hamlet or a riverbed is going to be the other thing I'm going to come in contact with. So after you've created your features, you don't have to name them yet. This is just we're just getting started. We're going to see how many trails we have in this space, because the trails are important, because that's going to be your path. That's your dungeon connection. So if you're looking at this from the word of dungeons, this is your entrance into the dungeon. These are the 2 rooms in your dungeon. Now we've got to connect them. So you roll a d6 plus 1 for the number of trails. So I rolled 4 plus 1 is 5. The first one is free, but you want to decide what kind of a trail or path it is. So we're going to have 5 total. The first one is free, so we're going to roll to see what it is. It's a 1, so it's just a normal path. So we just kind of draw a line saying that's where we're going. Going off to the second one, we have a 5, which is going to be a difficult trail. So that's our first one. Now we still have 4 more to do, so we can branch off from these locations to different areas to just create different paths. And that's why in the book it shows you to do these diamond shapes so that you have some directions on where everything is going. So we want to take our 4 and we want to create another path going off. So 4 is another difficult path. We could have it going off this way to the next location. And again, we would just finish out all of our paths, and we can path off from here in other directions. to give us options. And that's all this is about creating, is your options. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? How do you want to create your space, I guess would be the best way to say it. So you would create that. There's your paths. So you're pretty much set. Now you're going to kind of theme it all up. And this is where, in the back of the book, you have all these charts. It starts with, I searched the body. What did I find? Well, we didn't encounter anything. But here you can start rolling a D50 and kind of creating some theme and start adding some context to everything. And this is something I would recommend doing before you start naming everything, unless you have a setting that you in your mind that you want to use. But if you're looking for some rolls, start rolling on the charts, start creating your paths, start creating your wilderness dungeon name. Like, what is the name of our dungeon? There's dangers and there's secret treasures. So you're creating kind of maybe rumors or things that are known about the area. You're kind of what, getting the scene, getting the types of woods, smells and sounds. This was an awesome one. And these are all D50. If you're not familiar with rolling D50, all you do is you roll a D100. Anything 50 or below is what it is. Anything 51 and above, you just minus 50 from it, and that is what you get. So if I roll, 71, I minus 50, it's going to be 21. So we just have a deep gorge, layers of moist earth on both sides. And that's what the result would be. Pretty simple, straightforward stuff. If you're not familiar with D50 tables, that's how they work. So we got smells, sounds, then we get into encounters, which this is stuff that will come up during gameplay. But start getting your texture, I guess will be a good word for your wilderness. Necessary to kind of have a larger grid pattern. So this way, if we start going off, we kind of have a general map of everything in case we go back to locations, because I'm doing a lamination and I'm going to erase this when I'm done. I did want to be able to track everything. So this sheet came from New Big Dragon. New Big Dragon has some cool tables and charts and things that you can use. One of the things I like about it is their hex crawl worksheets. I'll put a link in the description below for everything I'm using, so if you want to check it out. But this is their 6 mile hex. Now the hex sheets are not the same design as this, but this is a general map, so I'm okay if things are off a little bit, just so that I'm keeping track of all the different hexes that I'll be exploring. So that way I didn't want to print a bunch of these pages off and then have to flip through a bunch of pages, kind of getting an idea of where I was, what I was doing, where things were. I kind of wanted to just do something small. So this was the first hex I created, and this is where my adventure is going to start. And then in my journal, I created all the, we'll call it the texture, because I don't know why I want to call it that, but I kind of created what all the different features are, the name of my dungeon, and just things that are going on. There's rumors of a treasure, of a crumbling tower, of a demigod who weeps sapphire tears. And if you look back at my sheet, I got a 5 and a 6, so either one of those could be the crumbling tower that was created, and maybe I explore that tower and find out if that rumor is true or not. This is why I like the charts that they had. It all kind of pulls together, and it worked pretty good. The sounds, someone or something weeping softly. There is no one. So I'm going to have a little bit of a haunt going on, like at night. Maybe I'm going to hear some weeping. Maybe I explore that. Maybe I don't. I don't know. So anyways, that's how I'm going to use my journal. I did, if you watched the first video, I did try to put in hex pages in my, this is a custom journal. I made it myself. It's another hobby I do is making books. And I did map it all out, which works, but again, it didn't give me that overall view. I'll probably end up taking one of these sheets and just color coding. Like I'll put like this is hex 1 and I'll just put it here, and just so that I don't know, maybe I'll double map it. It's not necessary. I think this will work out just fine for everything. But I tried, and this is why I like making custom journals until I find what works for me. So anyway, so that's one of the big changes I had to make to the mapping thing or the mapping for this game system is just kind of having that overall map, because a 6-day travel is, if I just travel, this is not going to be much to keep me for a gaming session. So I'm probably going to want to map out a few more areas if I was going to do that. Same here, even with the one I created. This isn't much. This would be maybe, if I take my time, a 1-day journey. So the next day I'm going to be going to different areas. So anyways, so that's where everything's at. This is Into the Wyrd and Wild, my edition of it. The tools that I'm using, the things that I'm doing to create this adventure. So the next step for me will be to actually sit down to play the game and just see how my concepts all come together, how they work, and if my design for using Knave in this setting works for the game. So thank you for watching and have a great day.